Co-powered by Ford, feels like family for a change.
Hello and welcome to Virtuosity. My guest today is the author of the biggest non-fiction bestseller in the recent history of Indian publishing, Sanjaya Baru's The Accidental Prime Minister, a memoir of his years in Manmohan Singh's PMO, broke all records and made its author a very rich man. Now he's back with a new book about the man whom many regard as the father of liberalization. No, not Manmohan Singh, but Narasimha Rao. He joins me today to talk about those two prime ministers, about the India they created and about the India they left behind. Sanjaya Baru, welcome to the program. Why Narasimha Rao?
Well, I think the key to understanding Narasimha Rao is to remember that he was just an ordinary politician.
Okay.
And we underestimate the common sense of ordinary politicians. You know, we systematically, particularly in the media and more recently, we systematically underestimate the ordinary common sense of ordinary politicians.
Explain that. That's an interesting point.
I think Narasimha Rao knew what was happening in India, was fully aware of the kind of change taking place in the country. I don't think he ever imagined he would have an opportunity to shape all that till he became Prime Minister. Right? And once he became Prime Minister, he was very quick to accept the advice of the people who met him. Now, that's the kind of common sense reaction of a politician who understands the problem when it's presented to him.
Why do you think he gave Manmohan Singh the job?
He said that I wanted an economist with an international reputation.
Why did Manmohan Singh accept?
I think Manmohan Singh came back from South Commission. He was already in Delhi. Don't forget, he was an economic advisor to Chandrasekhar.
Yeah.
He was already in Delhi. And so, you know, who says no to a job offer?
But politics, he's always gone on and on about being an accidental politician, about not understanding politics, etc. Yet when the job was offered, I don't seem to remember any reluctance.
No, I don't think he was reluctant. And secondly, I don't accept this theory that he doesn't understand politics.
Really? So what's your view? Because you've seen him at close quarters over many years.
Well, I've actually said in my earlier book, The Accidental Prime Minister, that Manmohan Singh had a fairly good understanding of politics. I mean, like any intelligent person living in Delhi for 30 years, from 71 onwards he was here. Now, if you're intelligent enough and you live in the city and live in Lutyens, Delhi, and move around, you understand how this country functions. You understand the politics of this country.
Now, there's another view of when Manmohan Singh started as finance minister. I think you say correctly in the book that he would not have been able to do anything if he didn't have the backing of the prime minister. It was Rao who said, whatever happens, go ahead. And remember, Rao was heading a minority government at this stage. But there are two views on how Manmohan Singh went wrong. One is he went wrong as a babe in the woods, very sensitive. As you say, when he was criticized, he resigned. He resigned, I think, 3 times,
That's right.
You say in the book. And the other is that he was actually quite clever when he went about reforming, and he resigned each time, not really intending to go, but as a pressure tactic. Which one do you accept?
A bit of both. I think first time he certainly resigned because he was upset that his own cabinet colleagues were criticizing him. But I think his subsequent resignations may well have been pressure tactics. But it's interesting that Narasimha Rao, on the third occasion when Manmohan Singh offered to resign, was a bit irritated. And I mentioned that from what I've been told, that he said, look, what is this? It's becoming a bit of a habit. And then got him to withdraw that resignation. After that, there was no further resignation.
Because, I mean, there was a sense by the end, because the reforms had stopped and Narasimha Rao was pretty strong, that if Manmohan Singh had offered to resign a 4th time, they'd have wrestled him to the ground and wrenched the letter out of his hand. By the end, they were still quite pissed off with his continual resignations, were they not?
That's right. And also, I think also the fact is that after Babri Masjid, after 92, Narasimha Rao probably realized he was politically vulnerable.
Now, here's the question. A man who resigned at the slightest provocation, why did this same man cling on to his chair with such tenacity during UPA 2?
UPA 2, I wouldn't be able to answer you.
You're an observer.
UPA 1...
UPA 1, he didn't really have to resign. He offered to resign once on the nuclear deal. But UPA 2, when there was chaos all around, he clearly lost interest. Why did he stay on?
Well, it's a good question, but I honestly don't have an answer because you recall, it was I who went on television in September 2013 when Rahul Gandhi tore up the ordinance.
Right.
And I actually went on television and said this time the Prime Minister should resign, because here you're the party General Secretary or whatever Rahul was at that time, Vice President, tearing up an ordinance passed by the Cabinet. I mean, this was direct insult. That too on the morning when Dr. Manmohan Singh was meeting President Obama in Washington. And I know for a fact that a couple of others around him also said to him that, you know, you can't continue like this. But I think by that time his sense of loyalty must have been sense of loyalty. I have no idea what held him back.
Loyalty to Rahul Gandhi, who tore up his ordinance.
Well,
I mean, he had no loyalty to Narasimha Rao, who brought him out of nowhere, and he resigned 3 times.
He was but
loyalty didn't stop him resigning to Narasimha Rao, right?
No, but I think that was different. That was in the early 90s. We are now talking of the late, 2010s.
You know where we're heading. The question is he really this sensitive man, or does he use the sensitivity as a tool to get what he wants?
Honestly, I can't answer that question.
Come on, push yourself. Come on, really.
I can't answer that question. I think that he's certainly sensitive, but he's certainly now more of a politician than we imagine him to be. And therefore,
when you say more of a politician, are you saying that he understands power politics better?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah? And are you saying that there's an element of him that is conniving?
Well,
I don't see how you can get out of that, because
I'd rather get back to my book on
Narasimha. Answer that.
I can see where you're taking me.
No, you've gone down this road, you can't stop now. So is there an element of Manmohan Singh that's conniving?
Conniving is a strong word.
What word would you use?
Well, I think he's a clever politician. I think Digvijay Singh once very famously said that Manmohan Singh is an overrated economist and an underrated politician. I think that's a fair description.
No, of course he's underrated as a politician, but is he cunning? Is he conniving?
Well, politicians tend to be, they have to be conniving.
I'll take that as a yes. All right. The other factor about Narasimha, which people don't seem to notice often enough, is the South Indian aspect. He was really a South Indian who had risen in a North Indian landscape.
He is the only South Indian Prime Minister who's had a full term.
Yeah, Devegowda doesn't really count.
Devegowda was only for a year, for 70 years. And I argue in my book that he understood Delhi. I think he was one of the few people from outside Delhi who had that grasp of the system in the city.
And he changed South India more dramatically than we realized.
That's very interesting. If you look at the top 100 businesses in India, 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, they're more or less the same, the names. Tatas, Birlas, Singhanias, Kanorias, Dalmias, Modis, all the Marwadi businesses. Bombay-based, Calcutta-based, and some Delhi-based.
Right.
Then you look at the top 100 in 2000. Between 90 and 2000, you have sea change. You have Shiv Nadar from HCL, Azim Premji, Narayan Murthy, G.V.K. Reddy, Dr. Anji Reddy, the Andhra businessman. In Delhi, you have Sunil Mittal, you have, the Munjals. So there was a huge transformation of Indian business that happened in that decade, which was facilitated by the end of the license permit Raj. Yeah. Because basically you opened up business, and guys who had the heat in their stomach, were able to go forward. Even the Ambanis, they benefited from the earlier system, but they took off in the 90s.
There is a view that what we are seeing now, the Modi generation, the people who use technology, who believe in free enterprise, think liberal is a bad word, are really the generation that grew up after 1991 and are in some ways the children of Narasimha Rao and that revolution. I want to talk to you about that. I also want to talk to you about the Muslim question, and of course we'll have to at some stage get to Harshad Mehta and the suitcase of 1 crore, but all that's after the break. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to Virtuosity. We're talking to Sanjaya Baru, who's the accidental Prime Minister, was the biggest success, the biggest bestseller ever in the history of Indian publishing, at least in non-fiction. Sanjay has a new book out. It's about Narasimha Rao, it's about 1991, and it's about the year that really changed India. I want to ask you a bit about that. Do you believe that the generation that followed, people who were born after 1991, who were very young after 1991, have a completely different vision of India and have no sense of what it was like earlier?
Absolutely. We at least I belong to the generation where you had to stand in a queue to buy a railway ticket.
That's right.
You had to book a trunk call. When I was courting my wife, I had to book a trunk call and sit next to the phone waiting for the phone to ring, right? Those were the days, right? And today, mobile phone. This generation is always on that mobile phone. So they have no clue.
But here's the irony. The man who kept talking about computers in the late 1980s was Rajiv Gandhi. The man who opened up the economy, brought in foreign goods, allowed young people opportunities they'd never had before was Narasimha Rao. Both were Congress prime ministers. Yet the generation that came up as a consequence of all of this hates the Congress.
I think this generation is tired of the Congress. I think the generation that today celebrates whatever has happened in the last decade or two has become impatient. They are tired of the Congress. They were tired of even Manmohan Singh, forget about Rajiv Gandhi, etc. So I think there is a generational shift that has taken place. And maybe the Congress can revive itself at some future point in time. But right now you're dealing with a generation of voters who think that, this is all old India and that Narendra Modi represents the new India.
Now, the thing about the Congress, and you can dispute this, is that the ethos from Panditji onwards has always been liberal. Whatever Dr. Manmohan Singh's faults, and God knows there were many, he was always a secular, liberal person. The argument is that today's mood, the country's mood, which is certainly not secular or liberal, owes its origins to Narasimha Rao, who was probably not very secular. Is that fair?
Well, I think there the judgment I would regard Narasimha Rao.
Because you avoid that hot potato in the book.
I avoid hot potato because that's in a sense 92, but I do mention the fact that the whole Babri Masjid issue was politicized by Rajiv Gandhi and by Arun Nehru.
Yes, exactly.
It is they who brought the issue into the political framework. And Narasimha Rao was left with the baby as it were, and he tried to handle it, and he himself has, in fact, he's the only Indian Prime Minister who's written a book trying to explain.
Have you read it?
I've read the book.
You're one of 5 people in the world who has a completely unreadable book.
Well, no,
all right, go on,
not inside. I'm talking about
Ayodhya. I'm talking the Ayodhya book. Insider is okay, quite readable in a soft porn sort of way. But
Ayodhya is a very good analysis of what happened. And there's an explanation. Now, no other Prime Minister has written a book trying to explain what they're doing, right? So I go along with the explanation. I have no reason to doubt it. I don't think he converted India into the country.
But what about the allegation that no Muslim will ever vote for the Congress because Narasimha Rao did not prevent the Babri Masjid from being demolished?
Factually not correct. If you look at the data that Yogendra Yadav and the CSDS have collected, there is no such communal-based voting at all in this country. Muslims have even voted for the BJP in some parts of India, but they have certainly voted for the Congress in many parts of India. They've voted for other regional parties in other parts of India. There is no systematic communal polarization of the voting against the Congress.
You don't think there is a Muslim vote which is now turned against Congress? You think that's too simplistic?
I think that's too simplistic.
Let's do the 2 other obvious allegations against him. The first is the Harshad Mehta allegation. People may not remember this, probably because unlike us, you were too young at the time. But Harshad Mehta, who had been hailed as the big bull and the father of the stock market boom in those days, and was revealed to be a bit of a fraudster, claimed to have taken a suitcase carrying 1 crore rupees in cash to the Prime Minister's house. The government nearly collapsed over those allegations. I imagine today, with today's 24-hour media, it would have. But Narasimha Rao survived. What do you make of that?
Veer, I say a very simple test about corruption in Delhi. Whether of politicians, journalists, or whoever, government officials. You look at what their wealth and the family's wealth was the day they assume a certain position. And you look at the wealth when post, right? You can look at people. You can look at what Narasimha Rao made in his 5 years as Prime Minister, his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. There's no comparison. You look at the wealth.
No comparison to what?
To what is happening today.
Yeah, but to say that he was a small-time crook and now we have big-time crooks is not a great moral defense.
It's not a question of crook. I'm saying that collecting money for the party is what every politician does.
So you think that's what he was doing?
Absolutely. Collecting money for the party is what every politician does. But personal aggrandizement by which you can show the politician owns an airline, he owns hotels.
And there was no evidence Narasimha Rao cared about money ever.
Zero. He has not
but
left
so do you believe but do you believe the Harshad Mehta allegation?
No, it's not a question of my believing it. I mean, the fact is that Harshad Mehta...
That's my question. Do you believe it?
who am I to believe or disbelieve? He came out with an allegation.
There are guys writing about him.
No,
yeah?
but this book is not about Harshad Mehta. This book is about economic policy.
So you don't believe or disbelieve it?
I don't believe or disbelieve.
What about the other allegation that a Prime Minister of India, particularly a liberal modern Prime Minister who presided over the changes in our economy, should not have hung out so closely with Chandraswamy?
Oh, Indira Gandhi hung out with
with Dhirendra Brahmachari and was criticized for it.
It's okay. Look, people, you know, at the end of the day, I evaluate prime ministers on the basis of their policies. You know, you look at the kind of people many politicians hang around with. You know, one doesn't have to.
But why did he need to have Chandraswamy come to the Prime Minister's house, Racecourse Road, and do havans there?
But lots of politicians have havans done. Lots of
Prime
them.
Ministers of India?
Prime Ministers,
you think Modi has
Deputy Prime
Minister? You think Modi has havans done at number 5 Racecourse Road?
Modi is still not yet in a position where he has to worry about his future.
But you think he might?
Well, God knows. But, you know, Indian politicians are very superstitious.
But you don't think
they live in a very insecure world.
Unlike Harshad Mehta, where you can have questions. But Chandraswamy was an obvious crook. You don't think he did
But look, Maggie Thatcher used to, you know, hobnob with him because...
she met him once through Tiny Roland. And he published many pictures.
Natwar Singh tells us that she met him repeatedly, that, you know, you read Natwar Singh's book. So, look, politicians are insecure people.
What you're saying is if a sleazeball can come into the Prime Minister's house and give cash or any kind of money, and if that money is used for the party, that's one kind of thing. If a sleazeball Swami comes and does havans, that's okay because other people do it.
These are words you use, Veer.
Yeah. No, they're my words. I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying. And you're saying,
you're not paraphrasing.
All right. Okay.
No, you're not paraphrasing what I'm saying.
Let's say Chandraswamy comes over.
First of all,
that's all right.
I
then
don't like
you're
to...
saying, let's not call Chandraswamy names, though I'm welcome to. I don't want you to do that. But say if Chandraswamy comes over and does it, okay, it does matter a bit, but not so much in the long run. If a Prime Minister of India buys MPs to win a vote of confidence, that's politics. Is that?
You know, we're Lutyens Delhi.
Yeah.
Over the last 25 years, has used arguments like this to defame Narasimha Rao, to make him look like a small-time crook who was communal, who did nothing for this country. That's the history that has been blown apart by Vinay Sitapati's biography, and that I reject through my book. I think this man did hugely important policy initiatives. I think it turned India around. I argue 1991, in fact my book is called 1991, because I argue 1991 after 1947 was the most important year for India. But there's been a systematic attempt in Lutyens Delhi to constantly talk about Chandraswamy, to Harshad Mehta, you know, communalization, Babri Masjid, to erase the record.
Undermine his legacy.
And therefore, I know where you're trying to take me.
I'm not trying to take you.
No, I think this is exactly the kind of argument against Narasimha Rao which I reject.
So your view, therefore, is that while there may have been political criticisms of him, and it is not your case, he was a perfect human being, that in the long run he will be remembered for the policies, for the fact that he took office at a time when India was on the verge of bankruptcy. Not only did he stave off that bankruptcy, he created the India we live in today.
No Indian Prime Minister has been a perfect human being till today, right? Nobody. Everybody has their flaws. And yet we remember them by their achievements.
Now that I've got you sort of enthused, you know where this is going. You've seen Narasimha Rao at close quarters. What's clear in the book is that you had unparalleled access, not just to Narasimha Rao, but to P.V.R.K. Prasad, to people who were around him. Probably more access than any Prime Minister had at that time. You've also, by working with Manmohan Singh, had unparalleled access. Compare the two.
Well, you know, so actually very interesting question, because and I've said this repeatedly, that Narasimha Rao was a lifelong number 2 who chose to behave like a number 1 when he became the Prime Minister. He decided, now that I'm the Prime Minister, I will take charge of the party and the government, and that was what created problem, because many around him in this party didn't like that. I think the problem with Manmohan Singh is that he was not able to make the transition from being a lifelong number 2 to becoming a number 1. He did that when he asserted himself on the nuclear deal. He did that on a few other occasions. But I think in the end, particularly in UPA 2, I think the legacy he has left behind, the memory is of a Prime Minister who allowed the party president to be the number 1.
So in terms of styles, that's it. In terms of what they did to India, Narasimha Rao had 5 years. Manmohan Singh had 10 years. Who changed India more dramatically?
Or without doubt, Narasimha Rao.
And who will history remember?
Narasimha Rao.
Really? Not Manmohan Singh.
Well, history will remember Manmohan Singh for the nuclear deal, because I think that was significant, right? That kind of...
Perhaps not as significant as he believed it would be, but was significant.
It's significant, because it has kind of changed India's kind of global status, etc.
Yeah.
But the real turning point for India after 47, in my view, and that's why the book is about 91, was 91, right? It's as I said, the economics, the politics, and the foreign policy of 91. That was a turning point. And in fact, I go forward to argue that the last quarter century has been shaped by the decisions of 91.
Who will history be kinder to?
I think history will certainly be kinder to both.
Come on.
No, I mean, you can't push me on this one. You can't push me on this. I think history will certainly be kinder to both. But there is one difference. I think the difference is that after Narasimha Rao, you had Atal Bihari Vajpayee, whose imprint and legacy was not at variance with Narasimha Rao. Right? In many ways, Vajpayee's 6 years in office was a continuation of Narasimha Rao. Unfortunately for Dr. Manmohan Singh, after him you have Narendra Modi. It's a point of departure for India. So if Mr. Modi gets a second term, it's a significant shift in Indian politics. And then I'm afraid the legacy of Manmohan Singh would be forgotten.
Forgotten? You go that far?
If Mr. Modi gets a second term, yes.
Really?
Yes. Because then India is shifting in a
completely different direction. Sanjay Baru, thank you very much. I just want to say about this book, if you haven't read it, I reckon you should, because it tells you a story that, as he says at the beginning of the book, people forget all too often. And without that story, we probably wouldn't be in this television studio. There would be no private television channels. There would be no India of today. It's written like a thriller. It's a really brilliantly written book. You must read it. And we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.